You used to be the one everyone loved to be around. Then life happened, and suddenly, you were just surviving. This is your story, even if no one's told it before. There was a time they didn't even realize how full their life was. Not because it was perfect, not because they had everything figured out, but because they had people. People who called without a reason. People who filled up rooms with laughter and shared silence like it was sacred. People who saw them, not for their achievements, but for the way they showed up every day without asking for credit. They were never the loudest in the room, but they were the one people waited for. The glue in their friend group, the calm in their chaos, the quiet magic behind every memory that felt like home. And then there was love, not the fleeting kind, not the Instagram kind, but the kind that came softly, through a glance in a college hallway, through a shared joke, a long walk, a conversation that turned into a connection, and that connection into a life. They found someone who didn't just love them, but chose them daily, and they chose back, with intention, with joy, with a heart wide open. They built a future together, not glamorous, but golden. The kind of life that made coffee feel sacred, a baby's laugh feel like music, and Sundays feel like a gift. There was struggle, sure, but there was love. And in that love, they felt rich, not in currency, but in connection. They didn't know they were living the good old days until life changed. Until the day came when they had to walk away from everything they once called theirs, not because they stopped caring, but because they cared too much to stay and let everything crumble. It didn't happen all at once. The breaking point never arrives with sirens or spotlights. It creeps in quietly, like a subtle crack on glass, one that spreads without permission. 1 month, the savings didn't stretch far enough. Another month, a parent's health began to slip, a job lost, a door closed, a hand reached out, but nothing to hold on to. They tried to stay strong, tried to smile through it, especially for the ones they loved. But every laugh began to feel like borrowed light. Every day felt like sprinting uphill with no finish line. And then, the hardest decision came. Not the kind you want to make. The kind that guts you silently, even as others call it brave. They packed a suitcase, not just with clothes, but with everything they were trying to hold together. A life, a family, a future. They looked into eyes that once made them feel infinite, and said goodbye. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Sometimes love looks like leaving, so you can come back stronger. Sometimes survival demands sacrifice, and no one tells you how much it costs. They boarded that plane not as a dreamer, but as a provider, not chasing success, but trying to outrun collapse. And in that moment, with the world shrinking beneath them through the airplane window, they didn't cry. They couldn't, because when you carry the weight of everyone's hopes, you learn to hold back your own pain until there's space for it. That space never came. 5 years passed, and somewhere along the way, they forgot how to laugh the way they used to. Forgot what it felt like to be surrounded, to be chosen, to belong. They got used to quiet birthdays, to hearing about family milestones secondhand, to pretending it didn't sting when no one remembered to ask how they were doing. They weren't angry, they weren't bitter, they were just numb. And that might be worse, because the opposite of connection isn't isolation, it's invisibility. They had done everything right, worked hard, sent money, paid bills. They were the reason others could sleep peacefully at night. But no one knew how they were sleeping. No one asked what they dreamt about, or what they gave up in the process of holding everything together. They looked in the mirror one morning and didn't recognize the person staring back. The sparkle was gone. The fire had dimmed. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was screaming. They had become a provider, a protector, a background character in their own life. They hadn't meant to disappear, but they did, piece by piece, sacrifice by sacrifice. And now, with things finally stable, the ache crept in, not for money, not for success, but for something much simpler. To be seen again, to be hugged without needing a reason, to laugh and not feel guilty, to walk into a room and hear someone say, "We missed you." It doesn't always happen with clarity. Sometimes it begins with a pause, a morning where they sit longer than usual, coffee in hand, staring out the window, not at anything in particular, but as if they're waiting to hear something from within. A strange ache starts to bloom, not the heavy kind, but the quiet one that whispers, "You've been gone a long time," from yourself. For so long they measured their worth by what they provided, by how much they endured, by how little they asked for. But now, with the pressure easing, the noise fading, they hear something else, something they hadn't heard in years, their own voice. And it asks, "Who am I? When I'm not working, when I'm not needed, when I'm not performing, who am I? When there's no one to impress, no one to rescue, no applause to earn." They begin to look, really look, at the person in the mirror, the lines on their face, the tired in their eyes, the longing in their chest, and they don't judge it, because buried beneath that silence is a person who gave everything and is still here, still standing. Maybe that's enough to begin again, not from scratch, but from truth. It starts small. They reply to a message they almost ignored. They send a voice note, shaky, a little unsure, to someone they haven't spoken to in years. They open their phone camera, flip it to selfie mode and smile, just for themselves. No filter, no caption, just presence. They water a plant, they clean their desk, they go for a walk, not to escape, but to arrive. For the first time in a long time, they aren't rushing, not toward anything, not away from anyone. And in that slowness, something begins to grow, a craving, not for noise, but for connection. Not for validation, but for meaning. They begin to reach out, not desperately, but honestly. "Hey, thought of you. How have you been? I miss this." Some messages don't get replies. Some calls go to voicemail, but some don't. Some lead to coffee, some lead to laughter, some just lead to a simple reply. "I've missed you too." And that's enough. Because this isn't about going back. It's about moving forward with softness, with slowness, with soul. They didn't wake up one day and feel whole again. That's not how healing works. There was no speech, no big reveal, no montage of victory, just a quiet decision to stop waiting for life to feel like it once did and start building a new one, slowly, imperfectly, intentionally. They began showing up, not just for work, not just for duty, but for themselves. They signed up for something small, a class, a group, a local event. They learned a name. Someone learned theirs. They started listening to music again, the kind they used to play when life felt lighter. They danced badly, quietly in their kitchen and smiled, because for a second they remembered. They are still in there. They stopped chasing success and started redefining it, not as numbers, not as accolades, but as presence, peace, belonging, even if it's just belonging to themselves. And with each small step, Each time they reached out, each time they rested without guilt, each time they forgave themselves for disappearing, they came back to life, not all at once, but in beautiful, broken human pieces. And those pieces began to shine again. Maybe this wasn't just their story. Maybe it was yours too. Maybe you've known what it feels like to once have everything: friends, laughter, love, purpose, and then to slowly watch it slip away. Not all at once, but in quiet, ordinary moments. A missed call, a growing silence, a life that shifted without asking. Maybe you've carried the weight for others, given endlessly, faded quietly, and told yourself, it's fine. As long as they're okay, I'm okay. But here's what no one told you. You matter, even when no one needs you. You're worthy, even when no one claps. You're allowed to come back to yourself, not because you've earned it, but because you never stopped deserving it. You are not invisible. You are not too late. You are not broken. You are becoming. So if this feels like your story, know this: you're not alone. You're not forgotten. You're just beginning again, with more soul, more depth, and more quiet power than you've ever had before. This is your return, and it's going to be beautiful. If this felt like your story, stay. Subscribe. Does this story reflect yours or someone close to you? Share your experience in the comments.